Big transition. That's right, we're talking about a big change, a generational change in business out there today, where a lot of baby boomers are planning on exiting their businesses and moving them down to people who are in their 20s or 30s. And it's a huge gap, not only in knowledge, but of course we're talking about a major transition in wealth and estate planning and so on. Welcome to NxBizSuccess. My name is Lynn Hinderaker, and I'm going to introduce you to a couple guys who can help us work through this situation. It's predictable. Many small business owners don't really know how to handle succession planning. That's why I'm happy to introduce you today to Nick Niemann. Nick is with McGrath North here in Omaha, Nebraska. It's a law firm, and Nick is kind of a specialist in the succession planning arena. And also Chris Best with Best Business Appraisals, also in the Omaha, Nebraska area. And Chris is a real specialist. He helps appraise businesses so that small businesses can get maximum value and obviously exit in an orderly and maintain as much wealth as possible. Right, Chris?
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for coming, guys. Listen, let's talk for just a second about typical scenarios, just average things that happen as you're out there counseling small business people. Nick, we'll start with you. What typically happens? What's going on when you get a phone call from somebody and say, we're all messed up out here. We don't know how to get out of the business, how to pass it along. Give me an example of things that we shouldn't do, but is very common probably.
Lynn, usually what we find is the business owners that we work with are very good at what they do.
Yeah.
They're good, whether it's making products, whether it's selling services, they're very good at that. But they enter onto an uncertain turf that they're not comfortable with when they start to talk about business succession planning or exit planning or transition planning.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they tend to hesitate, they tend to wait too long to take it on.
I see.
And so the biggest mistake that I'd say we see is just that procrastination, because they're not necessarily comfortable getting outside of what they do day to day.
And they don't really know how to begin.
They don't know how to begin.
Right.
Exactly right. And they don't know necessarily who to go to. We find what I call a junk drawer exit plan that a lot of business owners come in with.
Yeah.
Because they might have done an estate plan here or a buy-sell agreement here 1 year and bought a life insurance policy another year.
I see. Okay, yeah.
And they end up with something that doesn't fit together.
All these different pieces that in their mind will enable them to get out, but they don't really integrate, do they?
Exactly.
Exactly. Chris, in your area of business appraisal, I know that that's a complex area for specialists like yourself. What do you often run into? What's the common problem when somebody asks you to come in and appraise the business?
Well, I think one of the biggest issues is, as we talked about earlier, the business owner needs information so that he can make an informed decision as to what his exit plan should be.
Right.
And a lot of times, the business valuation is a critical piece of information that they don't have access to.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, what we find is, depending on the exit strategy that's chosen, the channel that's chosen to exit the business, the value will differ depending on the channel.
Yeah.
For instance, the value for an employee stock ownership plan is different than the value for sale to a third party.
Oh, really? So an ESOP, the company is going to actually be worth a different amount, even though it generates the same revenues, has the same assets, but an ESOP packages the value of the company differently than if it was a straight sellout? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because the ESOP valuation is driven by regulations, Revenue Ruling 5960, so forth, and whereas the sale to the outside party is actually happening in the real world, as opposed to a notional world that's driven by regulation.
I like that phrase, notional world.
It is a notional world.
Well, guys, you know, a lot of small business people don't know where to begin, as you said before, Nick Niemann. And by the way, it might be interesting to purchase a book that Nick Niemann actually authored called The Next Move for Business Authors. It's a great book that gives you a primer, kind of how to think about going through the process. But how does somebody find guys like you? You know, we all think about getting our business started and all the things and grand openings and salespeople, but when it comes time to get out of the business, we don't really know where to begin. Not everybody does it equally well. Can you give me just a primer on how to find a guy like Nick Niemann?
Well, Lynn, we work with a lot of different business advisors. Could be the company owner's CPA, could be a financial planner, could be a corporate lawyer, an estate planner.
Okay, so they're kind of in the network.
In that network. Yeah. And so what you see, we like to work with the advisors that exist for the business owner. Okay. We want to come in and help put things together. So in the Next Move for Business Owners, in the book that you just cited, that's what I talk about, is how do you need somebody that can help to pull it together, that has a plan to address all the components that need to be dealt with. Certain advisors are very good at dealing with one thing or a couple of things.
Okay.
But what we want to talk about really is somebody that can say, let's pull the whole plan together. Let's look at what's needed from start to finish in order to help you to plan your transition and then to have a successful exit in the end.
So Nick, it seems like the ability to synthesize would be extremely important here if you're talking about an attorney like you are here at McGrath North in Omaha, who can pull together and weave together all the components that comprise value and progress.
As in a lot of professions, lawyers have different specialties
Right.
or areas of practice.
Sure.
And so this area that we're talking about is what we call transition and exit plan.
Okay, so if I were to call an attorney or a legal firm out of the Yellow Pages, I would say, do you have a specialist in transition and what is it?
And exit plan.
And exit planning, okay. And that would get us maybe to the right person, huh? All right. Chris, how about you? I know as a business appraiser in the state of Nebraska, there's a limited number of people like you. That makes it a little bit easier to find people like you. But nevertheless, how do you sort through a business appraiser, know that you got somebody who's sharp enough to give you an accurate estimation?
Well, one of the things that's important to recognize is Nick's role in the process is he's the quarterback. He's
Sure.
the one that's calling the plays and everything.
Yeah.
And we're more like a specialist. We may be the place kicker or the running back, to use a sports
I like
analogy.
the metaphor, yeah.
We're highly specialized. There's a couple organizations that do grant credentials to business appraisers. I'll mention all of them. The National Association of Certified Valuation Analysts.
Okay.
They have credentialed appraisers. The American Institute of Certified Public Accountants has a credential.
Okay.
The two that I think are the most critical ones are the Institute of Business Appraisers. They have credentials that they grant to their members.
Okay.
And the American Society of Appraisers.
Okay.
And
all right. So 4 different nationally
four different
recognized
credentials.
organizations. Now, I know some people that are in the business brokerage business, and when I mentioned this to them, their attitude was, no big deal. You just call the banker and get a sense of earnings and take it times some multiplier. And they acted like it was no big deal to come up with a reasonably accurate estimation of value. As we sign off here, what's the problem in what's the flaw in their logic?
Well, the problem with their logic is, I mean, you don't want to be wrong on this. If you do this incorrectly, anyone can value a business.
Sure.
It takes a professional business appraiser who's got the training, the skills, and the background to do it correctly.
Yeah.
And if you're wrong, it could cost you thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars depending on it. So you want to make sure you get somebody that has the background and the experience and the credentialing.
All right. Well, Chris Best with Best Business Appraisals in Omaha and Nick Neiman with McGrath North, also in the Omaha, Nebraska area. This has been so insightful to me because it's a big process and consists of a lot of different pieces, as you mentioned before, Nick. And so I know all of our viewers are going to appreciate your insight. Thanks for coming on NxBizSuccess. It's a big subject, it's important, and it's important earlier in the process than you probably realize. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Lynn Hinderacher. Keep on going and keep on growing.